Well, welcome to it again, gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here having a chat with you today. I really wish you could have heard what we were talking about back there earlier, because it was very interesting. Conversation about robots and F1, but anyway, moving on. So I've got a number of questions that I was looking to talk about today. And I know that you've had a chat already to the audience, which is fantastic. But obviously, robots, pretty cool conversation. This convergence between AI and robotics, where do you think that's going to take us over the next few years?
Well, I think that we face a huge opportunity. There's all the current work going on foundation models, generative AI, ChatGPT, and I think there's a lot of obvious ways that these can enhance robots. Before I say that, let me say, robots today are pretty stupid. You know, people look at them, look at the humanoids, and see that they move like a human, they dance, they can climb the hill and all that. But in terms of intellectual function, they're nowhere, really. So there's a great opportunity to making them easier to interact with by being able to talk to them and have them talk to you so you can communicate better. I think, but I also think there's some barriers. A language model doesn't really connect very tightly with the physicality of a robot's behavior. And so getting a grounding of the information that a foundation model has is one of the things that we've been focusing on, and many people in the field are starting to focus on. I think there's great opportunity there, but it's not like the work's all done like I think some people might expect.
Do you see that human-robotic interface changing over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the interface now is all the programmers who have to write code to get every task analyzed, done, integrated, tested. And I think a lot of that could be done in a more human-like or natural way if we decide to do that. Certainly a more automated way, even if it's not the way a human works. So I think that a lot's going to happen along those lines.
Fantastic. Alpesh, as a head of innovation in the automotive industry, how do you see AI impacting your current business?
Well, there is already a huge impact of AI along the value chain for the automotive industry, and that's before talking about robotics plus AI. So if I just start with the AI side, well, if we rewind 6-7 years ago, and we're talking about the very basic stuff if we project ourselves into today, but the initial models that allowed us to do predictive quality, predictive maintenance, smart planning and scheduling, were developed and were started to be used already back then. What does it do for our industry if we think about the operation side? It's just making ourselves significantly more efficient. And what do we want as an automotive provider is basically being able to supply the mobility solutions at the right time to the right people. If you look at the automotive industry today, it's still mass production of specific types of vehicles, but you would maybe say per factory, maybe 7-8 different type of models, each of them 3 or 4 different type of trims. So you're in the dozen or maybe low teens in terms of variants. What we're really trying to do is to go towards fully personalized vehicles. We think that when it comes to the future trends of mobility, especially on urban mobility, people will want to have more personalized cars, either for themselves or actually as a journey. So we could sell this to fleet managers or what have you. If we want to enable our manufacturing and supply chain systems to do that, we really need the AI to underpin all of the individual elements of the value chain. So that's what I call the horizontal AI, and it started a couple of years ago, and we just need to accelerate that.
Do you see that personalization as a competitive advantage or a major differentiator in the future?
I think so. Now, it is not the only one. To be clear, I think, of course, there are many different types of differentiations that will lead to the success or failure of automotive companies, and we all know that cost remains one very critical item. But when you don't compete on cost, you need to find what other competitive advantages would be significant. And we believe that mass personalization in particular when it comes to specific transit. If you imagine that the car can be an extension of your home when you're commuting, an extension of work, or that it can be a place where you're conducting specific activities, a medical checkup or what have you, and you have these cars made available to you on subscription, well, that changes a little bit the paradigm of how you define mobility.
Very good. And do you see the world of, either of you, do you see the world of major manufacturers dominating the world of robotics, automation, or do you see that you are collaborating with lots of startups and you're cascading information? Is it mine and I'm competing with it, or is it let's share and be open?
I can start, and maybe Mark can add on, but I think it's well known. I think from Hyundai's side, we have acquired Boston Dynamics a couple of years ago. There are many other very promising robotics and robotics plus AI startups. I think this is not a game that you can do on your own. You do need to work in collaboration, and then whenever something is really interesting and is forward-looking and helps propel the group, and we see a synergy with the wider group, then it's probably time to acquire. So I think that this is definitely not something that will be only dominated by the big companies or done internally.
Yeah, I think that there's all kinds of up-and-coming companies that do unexpected things. I mean, OpenAI is only, 10 or 12 years old, something like that. And look at at least the news impact they're having now. But I think honestly, big impact. It's interesting when you look at the AI world, though, that there's only a few companies who can afford the kind of compute that's needed to do the most extreme form of foundation model generation. Now, it could turn out that you don't have to do exactly that in order to have a big impact. You can, sort of coattail on the work of the big models. And I think the jury's out, really, how that's going to play out.
Okay. Autonomous robots, autonomous vehicles, always a consideration, particularly when you layer AI on the top. Is this reality over the next few years, or is this really something that's several more years out?
Well, I can start. I mean, I think autonomous vehicles, from a technical point of view, are probably already part of the reality. So we do work with Motional in Singapore and in the US to develop our level 4 autonomous vehicles, like other companies are doing the same. These are no longer individual POTs. They are piloted in real environments, and the amount of the amount of AI that is embarked, well, beyond just the sensorization, but the amount of computing power and AI that is embarked in there is just going to grow further. I think the question that is on everyone's lips and in everyone's mind is how quickly will it conquer the market? How quickly will it be accepted? And maybe that's a different question. It's about understanding what is the tolerance for the type of shortcomings that would still be there, and how do they compare with the human shortcomings when we're driving our cars ourselves?
I think in robotics, it depends really on what your question means. I think the robots need to be locally in charge of their own motions and actions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their goals are determined by themselves.
Okay.
So if you go up the stack of the idea of autonomy, I mean, I'd ask you, are you autonomous?
Oh, good question.
Or any of you? We all have our families, our parents. Some of us have our parents. Our significant others, and that whole community is part of our guidance as to how we behave. So at some level, I think we're autonomous. We decide, whether we're going to go in the other room or not.
Yeah.
But at the higher level, not. And so I think the same kind of questions apply for robotics. Is the robot going to decide that it doesn't want to work on assembling the car today, and instead it's going to go and do something else? I don't think that's around the corner.
So I've got a couple of autonomous robots in the house, vacuum cleaning and mopping and all this kind of stuff, and they were rapidly accepted as family members, there's no question. They've got names, they've got everything. So, but the question is always, it maps the house out very beautifully, but who else gets to see that data? When it comes to vehicles, it comes to robotics, they're gathering data constantly. Is there a concern over the privacy in that data? How do you manage the privacy aspects?
Obviously, there's a lot of concern out there in the world over these topics, and I think there's a lot of work going on to try and get a handle on it. You know, I have to admit I'm not much of an expert on those things. It is true that the spot robots, when they're in a factory, have cameras that are used to help them navigate, and in principle, there's concerns about what they see and how that data are used. We've done a lot of work on the security. We means Boston Dynamics. I'm not actually at Boston Dynamics anymore, but we've done a lot of work on the security because one place the data can get out is if someone hacks the robot and can, you know, exfiltrate the data it has. So we've tried to be pretty diligent about making it so that that doesn't happen. Obviously, the car world has addressed that too.
Yeah, I think that, of course, data privacy, data security, and more broadly data governance is top of mind. First of all, I mean, all of those concerns need to be addressed for an application to be accepted. And if you don't do your homework, you get beaten at the end, because at some point in time, someone will figure out that, hey, I didn't agree for this data to come out of my vehicle and be transferred to a certain party. Or if there is a breach of integrity of that data, someone steals it or whatever, that's an even bigger concern. So that needs to be done. I think it's even more important when we talk about autonomous cars, but it is not exclusive to autonomous cars. Actually, even our current generation of EVs, any type of car, has some form of telemetry, and it's very important that the way the data is managed is extremely tight and extremely clear.
Okay. I think there's a slightly more abstract question in there. You know, we've been looking at making robots able to do some athletic activities that are activities that people do. And one of the approaches would be to go collect all the YouTube videos of humans doing that skill. And suppose we could learn about the skill from the videos. Would we be stealing the skill data from the people in the videos? I don't think there's any law yet, meaning, you know, case studies or anything on what the, maybe the closest thing is sampling music is an example of that kind of a problem where it has been identified. But I think this is going to creep into, at least if you're using foundation models based on data extracted in a big way, managing the rights to all that is going to be an interesting question over the next 5 or 10 years, probably.
I guess there is a link, and I'm going to ask it, is the question over ethics now. There has to be a discussion around this, I guess. Ethics over autonomous vehicles. This thing we've heard about in the press about, do they see a pedestrian, do they run it over, not run it over, all this kind of stuff. And robotics, I'm sure there's certain conditions as well. But who gets to have the decision on the ethics? Is that something that the manufacturers do? Is that the programmer's decision? Or is there a governance body that can do that on their behalf?
One of the things we're trying to do is generate what would I call it, disciplined data. Right now, I think most of these discussions are happening in a vacuum of real information. You know, the media has whatever it says. Yeah. There's the public reaction to a sensational event like the San Francisco event where the pedestrian was killed. But do we really know what people's attitudes across various demographies and situations are? So we have a group that's trying to collect organized data on some of these things. Obviously, the group isn't big enough to do it for the whole world, but we're making a stab at that. So we're interested in kind of trying to do that rather than focus on making judgments about how things should be regulated. If I could say one more thing. I do hope that the regulation doesn't outrun the innovation.
Well, I was just going to ask about regulators and the role of regulators.
Yeah, you know, obviously all this stuff is happening fast. You know, the regulators are going to need to know a lot in order to do a effective job in both increasing safety without debilitating new developments.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also when you put yourself in the shoes of a big company, it's setting up the right governance for ethical AI. It's actually something that is in the way, that is in the works. I don't think that any company is really completely there yet, but it's a very important area because, again, there are risks involved if you don't take all of those aspects into account. Because ultimately what you're selling is always something that will be consumer facing, and there are, well, if wrong choices are made, there are consequences. So it's looked at quite seriously. Now, if we probably need to make some distinction. If we look into, and those distinctions I think depend on the use cases. When you think about manufacturing and operational related use cases, the risks tend to be a little bit lower than when you are looking into the consumer-facing use cases. And as a car manufacturer, we have both. So there might be a distinction, I think, between the two, and it could be related to similar type of foundational models, but just the way in which we are using them and applying them might be quite different, and the type of risks need to be evaluated in function of the context in which those applications work.
I think that's why you see so few robot companies focusing on consumer use of the robots. They're almost all in industry or research, a place where there's an entity on the other side who can be committed to following some practices, safety practices that are more manageable than what consumers are willing to sign up to or able to sign up to.
Got it. Any particular challenges that you faced going back a few years now when you were really kicking off with Boston Dynamics on scaling the business? Was there any particular massive hurdles that you had to overcome?
Well, Boston Dynamics was a very unusual company. I used to give a talk to business people, and the title of the talk was No Business Plan, No Investors, No PR Organization, No MBAs, and I can't remember all the other things on that list. So we were just a bunch of engineers who bootstrapped, and we kind of meandered along for years before we became anything that anybody from the outside might call a business. So I guess that's my answer.
You were talking backstage about some of the different talent that you were able to attract and the different diverse skills that they brought to the table. Would you mind sharing some of that?
Well, we started out talking about car people. And at Boston Dynamics, we have a former certified airplane mechanic. We had a couple of people who built their own race cars and raced them.
Very cool.
But you have to keep in mind, robotics is as much a hardware activity as a software activity. I didn't say it in my talk, if any of you are there, but I usually harp a little bit on the point that the mechanical engineering isn't done. And it's just as important as the software and learning and AI stuff if you really want to make robots go ahead. And to some degree, we struggle with so many students want to study AI and computer science, and at least comparatively fewer on the what I would call the hard engineering disciplines. And I think that pendulum will swing back.
Okay. Challenges in the automotive industry at the moment under questions of sustainability. Do you see AI impacting that in any way? Manufacturing processes, supply chain?
Yeah, so maybe I can respond in a couple of ways. I think first, challenges when it comes to adoption, or when it comes to deploying AI and actually robotics and AI for that sake. And then maybe challenges related to sustainability and how AI would contribute to that. On the first one, I think that the major challenge remains how you, assuming you know what your use cases are. That remains the basics. I mean, we do have a business case, so we do need to figure out what we want to do. In the case of operations, as I said earlier, is how we can be as efficient, minimize our energy consumption, maximize our flexibility, maximize our quality, whatever. The metrics are very clear, how we can do better. Assuming we know the use cases, the major challenge will be first to collect and to organize the data. And it sounds very basic, very cliche, very old, but this remains the reality. Just as we get more complex models and we are able to do more things, guess what? Those more things need more data, and we need to get that data organized. And that is a huge effort. So the setting up the foundation is a never-ending process. I think this is the big learning. It's not something you do 7 years ago, and after that you can just keep going. We need to keep improving the data foundations, the data models, the knowledge graphs, everything that basically allows you to run the AI. That is the first big challenge. The second challenge, I think, and that I think will come more in the intersection of robotics and AI, is you need the diversity of skills. If you think about the type of use cases, or one of the ones we're working on, it's at the intersection of R&D and application, is about extending the automation of pick and place, right? Which basically picking parts and kitting our pallets for bringing them onto our assembly line and for the assembly operation. So this is typically a very manual job. We are automating it. So normally we start with the typical cobot and or industrial robot and the typical rule-based type of automation, and now we're bringing AI onto it. But half of the job is AI, the other half of the job is on grippers. So to Mark's point, you need both skills, and you need both to be able to understand each other, because otherwise you end up going much slower in the way in which the research and the development is conducted. So that intersection of skills is extremely important.
So with robots being used more and more for manufacturing in general, there's a discussion around displacement of workers and so on. But again, replaced by many new people involved in robotics and so on, new methodologies. Do you see, over the short term, being less than 10 years, a positive or negative impact from the technologies that you're working with, on employment in particular?
So let me give a couple of answers. I know just a few years ago, the World Economic Forum did a study that predicted a substantial net increase in jobs from robotics and AI. I can't remember exactly the scope, but it was an interesting result. Just in the recent years that I've been involved, the conversation has changed substantially. Almost everybody that we sell to claims that they're short on labor, that it's very hard, that they have lots of turnaround on their labor, that it's very hard to get young people to do the kinds of jobs. This is, warehouses for fulfillment centers, things like that. If you look at the demographics in Asia, like in Japan, China, Korea, the populations are aging, and since COVID, the lore is that young people don't want to do many of the jobs that were up there. So I'm not saying that there aren't people who are going to be replaced with automation, but that's only a part of the story. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to do things with automation that wouldn't otherwise get done.
Okay.
Maybe just to add on what Mark is saying, well, we need to conduct a bigger study, but I think I can share what we see in our group, and not only in Singapore, but worldwide. One of the major concerns, actually, not especially for our mass production factories, is that we might run out of workers. So the concern about trying to automate is more because we need to keep being able to produce as many cars as we're doing right now. But the reality is very simple. The job market is shrinking, either because of aging population, as Mark highlighted, but even in the US in particular, or in Europe, well, people want to do different jobs. It's no longer a job that you take for 10 years. After COVID, the turnover has increased significantly. So what does that mean? if you attract people in a manual manufacturing job, you need them to remain interested, so they need to be multi-skilled, and they need to find that this is...
Otherwise, there's this turnover that you referred to,
exactly.
right? People just don't stay.
Exactly. So by nature, the type of jobs are going to change, and by nature, we'll need more of the quote-unquote robotics and AI type of jobs rather than the operational type of jobs. And even in the operational side, you need people that are versatile and that want to do several different things. Because actually that's what they want. They don't want to stay in a single line for 4 or 5 years, and they don't want vertical progression. They want horizontal progression. So this is what we're seeing. I had those discussions with our president and plant managers in the US and in Europe, and yeah.
Got it. Mark, when you first started taking your amazing technology to market, how did you go to market with it? Were you able to sell it? Was it flying off the shelf? I mean, how did you take it to market?
First of all, let me put in the caveat that as Boston Dynamics went from being most a research organization, even though we were commercial and making some money, but as we went from a research contract-based company to being a product-oriented company, that's when I extracted myself.
Oh, okay.
So I did a lot of the selling in the early days and all that, but I'm not really the commercializer. And as it became more commercial, I decided to do the new thing
set, right.
because I want to do research. But that having been said, in the early days, we sold contract work to people who wanted to figure out how to make the future happen. A lot of it to some of the government agencies in the United States, like DARPA, that has funded all kinds of futuristic research. As the robots became productized, I was involved in the productization of Spot, the quadruped robot. Mostly we sold to researchers at first, and just in the last year or two, it's becoming more of a real business where some of our people figured out what the big opportunities were and have been focusing on that, which is industrial inspection and rounds and readings and things like that. And we've been getting customers who buy bigger, place bigger orders with shorter timelines, all the stuff that if you know about selling,
fits perfectly.
You focus on. So, it's coming along. I would also say, though, that robotics isn't the huge money-making industry yet that we all dream about.
Oh, okay.
Warehouses is a place where some people are making money. Not much else.
Interesting.
Now, I'm excluding the more traditional fixed robots that do manufacturing. I don't know what the economics there are.
Okay. There's, you are more of a consumer of robotic technology, right, as a manufacturer?
Yes.
Do you see that spend on robotics is going to be increasing over the next few years significantly? And does AI change that in any way?
And so to the first question, absolutely, yes. The spend on robotics equipment has always been increasing, and it's just going to increase even more. Will AI help that? I think so, because, well, if you think about the automotive industry, the press shop, the paint shop are already close to 100% automated. The assembly line is not yet highly automated. The plant we have here is a pilot, and it's around 50% automated. That's kind of the highest we've ever seen, and we still have some way to go. What is going to make the difference? It's AI and additional progress, of course, on grippers and mechanics, but it's mainly AI, because you need to make, especially the assembly operation, it's highly manual, requires high flexibility. So it's enabling and making the robot more intelligent that is going to make the difference and allow us to be able to do that. It's AI, and then also the computing power, because in mass production factories, the takt time is around 40 seconds, so you don't have much time to compute what you need to do and then get it done. So for sure, I think the recent developments, both in terms of computing power and of AI, will enable the next mile of automation, and that is the direction of travel, as I've mentioned earlier, because there'll be less and less people willing to do this job.
Got it. Some of the clients that my team works with are early-stage tech companies, And some of them struggle with innovation. Some of them are brilliant at it. I just wondered how you, in both of your organizations, encourage that culture of innovation. Was it attracting the right talent? Was it giving them the freedom to fail? What exactly sparked that innovation, and how do you maintain that spark?
I think at our company, everybody's about thinking outside the box, trying to do something different. You know, if everybody's saying A, then we say Z. Okay. To first order. And, you know, that's not always the best thing, but that's sort of, I think, who we are, the kind of people I attract and look for. So I don't think innovation has been the problem. And in fact, people used to criticize me for having too much fun and thinking our organization was going to have too much fun. Why don't we get serious? It's just the way it is. But
it sounds like a brilliant environment.
Okay. Well, as far as we're concerned, we're slightly different. As an organization, HMGICS, sits squarely in the group, in the Hyundai Motor Group, and as such, we do have some obligations. But still, we have been set up as an innovation center. So how do we manage to keep that up? It's the incentives need to be set up in the right way. So in our case, we do have a factory. So whenever we produce, we need to produce with the same KPIs as production. But when we don't produce, we are developing projects. We are basically trying to develop the relevant AI, robotics, and other technologies to improve our manufacturing stack. Those projects, involve failure, involve experimentation, and we have basically the relevant stage gates to make sure that we don't stick to something that is failing all the time and that we change tack quickly enough. And that portion, we need to keep basically a healthy rate of projects that don't work and projects that work, and on average, seeing a movement that ultimately is measured when we do production. A production event is kind of a performance event, right? So you measure how better you're doing at every production event, and normally it should be contributed by the R&D project. So that's how we are trying to set ourselves up. So some structure, some metrics, but then also some freedom to fail on the projects that contribute to the improvement.
Now, both of your
I wanted to add one more thing, a little bit along those lines. One of the things we've done with the AI Institute to foster innovation is declare no products. So products have the fact that people have short-term deadlines usually.
Yes.
The tails of the reliability curve usually play a big role in what people are doing and who gets hired. And I think that especially in AI-driven robotics, there's some problems that are longer term than that have to get solved, that will never get solved if everything's done incrementally. And so one of the plans for this institute that I'm running is to keep the product at bay so that we can work on the longer term, harder problems. The other thing I would say, that I'd like to say, which some people don't think I'm serious about, is, you know, there's time, talent, and money. Money is cheap, but time and talent are really expensive.
Yeah.
And I think if you can find a way to work that way, I think innovation has a better chance to succeed.
So on the back of the time,
and I would say that even Alpish's organization, which is much more in the heart of Hyundai, from my understanding, they have freedom a little bit to have the financial productivity set down so that they can leap ahead.
So on the basis of talent being one of those three that you've highlighted, how do you both attract and retain talent into your organizations? And do you see AI changing that in any way?
Competition for top AI talent is fierce. And people apply, not only are there other places to work that have, that will pay more, even if you have money, but one of the questions we get is, how many GPUs do you have? Or how many GPUs am I going to get to use in my research? And you know, we can't compete with Meta, Google,
sure.
And some of those other big, Amazon, those big compute companies. On the other hand, we have an organization that's really about pushing the boundaries, and there aren't too many places like that. At least that's what the people who come and work for us think, and that's really the company.
I think for us, I think very much on the same line. There are areas on which we can't really compete with the big tech, even though we might have access to enough GPUs. But I think most importantly is having people who align with the purpose for which we have created HMGix and for what we stand. So we stand for progress for humanity. But what does that mean? Is shaping future mobility, and everything that we do, even though what we are focusing on is manufacturing R&D very much in HMGix, but it's about enabling the creation of the future mobility solutions, the personalized vehicles, and the same manufacturing stack to create the AAMs, the urban air mobility. So that is how we try and inspire, and ultimately the problem statements is the second part. One distinction when you work in a robotics plus AI environment. I mean, we are not developing the robots, but we are using them. Well, this is basically real life applications. So that sometimes also helps inspiring people, especially those who come from tech, but at some point think, okay, I need to do something that gives me a bit more purpose.
Excellent. Alpesh, Mark, thank you both very much. The red light's flashing, so I guess it's time to go. But thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.